How's it going, everyone? I am Jeremy Alexander, and welcome back to another Let's Play to Learn tutorial video. In this video, we're going to be covering the Bug Butcher, which is a game we just played, and we have a few things that we can actually learn from it. The first is going to be our level design. It's something I didn't really talk about in the Let's Play to Learn video, but it really is a huge accomplishment with level design, what they did. And it's all a trick of the mind. And that's what's really cool about 2.5D games, or in this case, the Bug Butcher. It had really nice artwork to kind of make the world, the level, feel like it was 3D. It made it feel like the player was small and there was this big world around us. But really, it's a 2D world. It's all flat, and it's really cool how they achieve this effect. So I'm going to try my best to replicate that for you. I am not an artist, and that's why I usually get artists for my games. So it's kind of a big thing to do this with someone who can actually draw really well, because you're going to get a better effect that way. And that's kind of the big takeaway from the Bug Butcher. The artwork and the animation were on point, and then matching that with nice gameplay made it a really fun experience. So we're going to be doing that, and then we're going to just be programming the very simple player with vertical shooting. I thought that would be something cool to do. It was a really cool mechanic that I liked in the Bug Butcher, and I think we're going to put in a very basic reflection just to really illustrate how big you can make a 2D space. Now, Construct 2 is not actually really built for this. I think you can pull it off really effectively in Construct 2, but again, you need the artwork for it. What Bug Butcher was made in was Unity, and Unity obviously has this 3D space that you can rotate around, and you can actually go inside, and therefore you can design levels of this nature a lot easier. So we're going to pull it off, but not my first choice in engine when it comes to doing something like this. However, I think this will still be a really good tutorial for you to see if you've never done anything like this before. So what I'm going to do, or what I'm going to attempt to do, as you can see here, I actually have already tried to attempt to do it, but I'm going to redo it a little bit here. So I'm going to make a sprite. I'm going to make this my base sprite. I'm going to make this, I want to make these all the same color. Let's make this 45, 45, and 45. So it's just this kind of gray color, and this is going to be my base color. Now, I am not someone who is really good at color theory, but I still know that this color is going to be pretty much our primary color that we're going to base it off of. Now, what I want to do is I want to drop the opacity down a little bit, and now we're going to actually make the tricks of this. So I know that I made this 250 by 250. It's going to kind of create these weird edges. So I'm just going to kind of make this a little bit bigger. Kind of want to snap to grid for right now. The next thing that I need to do here is I need to make a drop off, and I need to actually have it so this part of the level really convinces your eyes that it's dropping into the abyss, it's dropping down. To do this, I need to have a supplemental object in the middle. I'm going to make it a tiled background. I'm going to make it 32 by 32, so I don't want to make it too big. Oops, 32 by 32. And what I need to do here is I need to take our base color. I'm going to put our base color on like this. And then I'm going to drop it down, not to black. I don't want to go directly to black, but as close as I can. I'm going to leave this middle area. Now, this middle area is going to be reserved for black, so we can actually kind of define these edges. And what this is going to do is it's going to actually create this effect, and you may not see it because you're probably used to seeing art as flat, but this is really going to create something strong. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make this really bright, and then I'm going to even accent that at the top here. Okay, so now we should have, hopefully, if I did this correctly, I did. Let's see if I can actually make this perfect. Just like this, we have this significant drop off. So let me kind of stretch this out like this. Now, even though that this is our base color, you can tell that it's actually different from this color because we put the opacity down on this. If I bump this back up to 100, it should be the exact same color. And that's something you want. You want this to be subtle, but at the same time, the more severe it is, the more it tricks your mind to thinking that it's actually there. So I'm actually going to make this that big. What I want to do now is make another, this is actually just going to be a sprite, and I'm actually going to grab that color. I don't remember what it was. So I'm going to go back into our tiled background, and I'm going to grab this color, and I'm going to go like this. Now, there are a lot of ways that you can design this, and there's a lot of ways you can do drop-off colors. I'll show you another trick to doing this in a second. I don't think I'm going to apply this as much. The first thing that I need to do here, though, is I need to make sure that my Z order is correct. And this is something that I know you don't have the Z order toolbar in the free version, but you should be able to move the Z position. It's kind of hard if you can't see everything, and this is kind of a must-have if you're ever going to make a 2.5D game in Construct 2. You must have the Z order bar to see what you're doing. So now technically what I could do is I could drop this color off even more, and I can just kind of do the same thing here with the, like, I guess I could go even darker. I don't have to go to straight black. I kind of want to reserve straight black so I can actually use them for edges. But you can see that I can go even darker, and hopefully that would show it. Now, it might show it, it might not show it, depending on how well I mix the colors, how well the transition is from one color to another, how the opacity is. So I might just leave this as a solid color because I don't know if I'm mixing this up too much without hitting play. So now this may not look as trippy as you might think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to do the background area of this. And now technically I should be doing this on another layer, but I think this will work for right now. And let me not neglect that I do have these 3 objects in here already that I kind of copied over. Let me get rid of these. Oh, actually, I'm going to leave these in here because we're going to be programming them. I gave our player an instance player state because we're going to need a state machine to control our player, and a boolean of inst reflection. So that way we can actually add in a reflection object to it. Then I have a platformer behavior and scroll to behavior. Very basic stuff. I have on the bullet the origin point to the left and the bullet behavior and destroy outside layout. And then on the gun, I have the origin point to the left, and I have an image point for the bullet right at the tip of the gun. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to designate this as the floor. I already have an object floor in here from before, but I'm going to call this floor 2 just so I don't have any conflict. I'm going to make this object solid. And what I'm going to do from there is I'm now going to design the background. And this is where it's just pretty much the same thing. The opacity is just going to be lighter. So I'm going to clone our tiled background. And I'm going to put this right here. Now, if I leave this at 100 opacity, it's going to be, there's not going to be any effect to this. You won't notice anything. But if I drop this down to 50, it's going to kind of go straight into the background. And now you'll just think that it's farther away. That's how your mind is going to process that information. Let me put this down. Then what I want to do, just like the Bug Butcher, I want to get as close to it as I possibly can. I'm going to make another sprite here. I'm going to take the rectangle tool. I'll take this color. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to control click. Generally, you should be able to do that. If you can't, I just updated to the newest version of Construct 2, which you should as well if you haven't. There will be a link in the description so you can actually do that. Oh no, control Y. What I'm trying to do here, and this is a lot easier on smaller objects, is just kind of cut out the middle like that with a alpha of 0. So now I kind of have this window frame, which if you remember in the Bug Butcher, is kind of what they have. They have this little window. I guess it's not exactly to the edge of the canvas there. They have this window like this, and then you can kind of see through it, and then they have these really cool art areas of their lab. Okay, then what I need to do here is I need to add in another sprite. This one is going to be blue, just like in the Bug Butcher, but this is going to have an alpha of 55, should be good. And this is going to go to Z order, send to the bottom of the layer. And we're going to, before I put that to the bottom of the layer, let me bring that to the top. We're going to stretch that out to pretty much all of this. And now we can send this to the bottom. Okay, so let's actually bring that opacity up. Now, I actually used the opacity in the image editor, which is pretty much the same thing as just using the opacity, but this is making it pretty defined from the start versus controlling it. So what I might want to do is just put this to 255 and then drop it down here. They're pretty much the same thing. It just depends on how you want to do it. Okay, so now hopefully you can start to see where I'm getting at with this. You can start to see some kind of difference, and really stark difference between these colors and between this. So what I want to do is first I need to make sure that this player, I might as well put all of these guys on their own layer just so we don't conflict with this. I'll stop being lazy about that. I'll cut them out, put them on their own layer. Just that way we know exactly where this is, and we don't have to mess around with their Z order. But if you do have the Z order window, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to create a level like this. So you can see where this player is going to land. Now let's actually set up the layout. Let's go to our project properties. And since the Bug Butcher has this big layout, it's going to be pretty much static. We're going to have this be the same size as our layout, 640 by 360. And let's make sure I'm previewing with NWJS. I am. You can actually see the size of this now. And hopefully you can see just exactly where this drop off is and how this looks. Now, the one thing that I don't like about this is I kind of matched these up a little too well. So now they're kind of all hitting the top of the player. I don't want that. I want this to be a little higher. So I'm going to turn off snap to grid. I need to go to that layer that I locked. And I'm going to kind of push this up a little bit just so I kind of have more room to work with. Now, another thing I can mess around with is the opacity. I don't have to leave it at 85 because I've already dropped it down a significant amount. The more I drop it down, the more difference it should just play on your eyes. This is the floor. This is the solid object that we collide with, you know. So we just kind of want to mess around with what is going to really create this 3D looking effect. So there we go. It's still kind of perfectly matched up with the head because it's a solid object, so it's going to be right there. I should have known better. Let's just kind of put this up here, and let's move this guy down just a little bit like that. That way we don't really have any interference with the player's head as much. Let's just make this exactly like we would have in the game. Something like this. So you're going to start to mess around with the depth of all this, and it hasn't really clicked yet that we've actually created this pseudo 3D environment. It's going to start to click more when we include a player reflection. So let's start to add that in. Let's clone the object of the player. Let's call this object player reflection, and let's remove both of these behaviors because I don't need them. Let's go into the player reflection object, and let's actually flip it vertically. And then I actually need to bump up the size here because it's 32 by 32. So when I actually put this here, and let me bump down the opacity to 50, I've automatically created this reflection effect, and therefore I've created a bigger sized room. Just by doing that, you can already see how this is going to interact with this room. Now, another thing you could do, and it might be something to look into, is you can try to place the player right in the middle of the floor. And to do this, all I have to do is change my collision box to about halfway down. I can control click these points, and I should be able to move them down with that. I guess this is moving up. Let's try pushing this back. Let's add the point back. Okay, things are happening. Let's delete this point. Let's try to make this as perfect as I can. Oh, this is a huge object, that's why. Okay, when you're making this, make sure you make a much smaller object. That was a mistake. This should be 16 by 16 or something like that. And let me show the collision polygon so we can see where I'm colliding now. So it's going to be kind of like this. And I want to make sure that this kind of doesn't line up as much with that vertical bit there. Let me push this up. So let's push this up to 80. Push this guy down until it's perfectly straight. And there we go. It's usually probably going to be better that you have a solid object than kind of using half of a collision polygon, because it'll probably end up messing up your player at some point, I'm sure. But there we go. Now we kind of have this middle effect where it should be in the middle of the floor. And it doesn't actually matter if it's at the top of the floor or the middle of the floor. It's all about how you design the back of the layout and how you can actually utilize the opacity being, I guess, what would it be? Less in the back and more in the front. So now that we kind of have the basics of this level down, I can even, let me add one more thing. I'm going to add another tiled background here. Put this to 16 by 16 so I don't make that mistake again. And I'm going to make this just kind of like, I know they had like cool tanks and crazy stuff. If you go watch that video again, you can really see what I'm trying to illustrate here with the level. So this is going to be a tiled background that's 16 by 16, and I'm going to loop it like this, something like this. And now because I have the Z order bar, I can actually push this to be behind the object I need it on if I created it on that layer, which I did not. Let's go back to this layer. And if I had more of a background here or more of a border rather than this, if this kind of was a little bit more like, if I grab this color like this, and I kind of just made it like so, I could then push this behind, and then I have to push this guy behind, and there we go. So it's all about messing around with the Z order and getting it to be pretty perfect the way that you need it to be. Whatever, I haven't been naming these sprites. Let me put the opacity of this down to 50. The opacity of this guy can be a little bit more prominent because it's a pretty big thing. It's kind of like the window, but this can even be further. This is really showing glass is what this was meant to do. This shows the glass of this object, and then you can hide something behind it, which is what I did. I tried to just draw like those white frilly things that you see there. So this will kind of show just how far back it is, and then you'd have some kind of background color. And hopefully with this image right here, you can start to see the depth we're trying to create. Now we need to actually program in the reflection. We need to program in a few more things here, but hopefully this level design, even though I know it's not the greatest and I apologize for that, hopefully after 16 minutes of me talking about this, you're kind of understanding how you can start to design a bigger platformer level. Okay, now that we have that, let's start to do our player here. So the first thing we need to do is, let me just go over this again. We have two variables. We have our player state, which is a number, and we have our reflection, which is a Boolean. We have a platform behavior and a scroll to behavior. I pushed down the speed to 150 from 350, and I turned off the jump by just putting the jump strength to 0. So what we're going to do is we are going to add in, let's first do our every tick. Let's set up our reflection and our gun. So to do this, let's set up our gun like we normally would in other videos. Let's just set it to our object player.x. Actually, since I didn't even make a gun image point, I can just use the center origin point, so we don't really need to mess around with that too much. I do have, it should be in here, I didn't point it out, I do have a reflection image point that I set it to the bottom. I could just quick assign this to the bottom, and that's where I'm going to actually put this on. Now there's other ways of creating reflection effects that are way more advanced. This is just the basics to illustrate it. What I want to do is I want to set object reflections position. Let's set it to, let's grab the player, and now let's grab the image point X. I like doing that more so I don't have to type it out as much. Let's grab the reflection. I can just copy this and put it for the Y image point as well. Okay, so now it's doing that in the every tick. If I hit play, we should actually see the reflection kind of follow. If it's not doing it that way, it's because I need to go into, okay, we'll fix that in a second, but now you can actually see these things at least starting to take shape. Let's go to our reflection, and let's put our origin to the top. So our reflection is at the top. Let's put our origin to the top as well. So hopefully this will now bind it right at the top, which it does. And there we go. Now we have this reflection effect that will trail with us. And when you have other things going on, this effect is going to matter. This effect is going to show just the exact same opacity difference that we're trying to show. Okay, so now that we have that pretty much basically done, let's set up our player state and let's go from there. What we want to do is we want to find out if we are, what state we're in. We actually want to define the states a little bit, and we want to have, let's do it like this. So if our player, compare the player state is equal to 0, copy and paste twice, or 1, or 2. Let's make comments here. This means that we're shooting. 0 means we're shooting. 1 means we are walking, let's say, we'll walk left. And then 2 means we are walking right. So what we're going to do is we are going to first need our triggers, and then we're going to need to set up our other things as well. Let me think here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to set in our walking left, so if our state is equal to 1, we're going to set the gun to be mirrored. We're going to copy and paste this. We're going to flip this to be not mirrored. We're going to set our player to be mirrored. Copy and paste this to be not mirrored. And then we're going to do the same thing for our reflection, so it kind of looks like it's actually being reflected correctly. And we're going to set this for not mirrored. And now this is the part where we're going to incorporate our vertical shooting. What we're going to do is we're going to set the angle of the gun to 0. And we're going to have to do this for both, because what we want to do is we want to actually put in our every tick a way for our angle to actually be at 270. And to do this, we're going to put this in our player state here. So what I want to do is I'm going to need to compare where the player is mirrored or not. So let's go here to our player. Let's find out if it's mirrored. And we could put this in an else. I'm just going to paste this in and invert it by hitting I on the keyboard. That way you can kind of see what we're going to do. If our state is equal to 0, if we're shooting our gun and we're mirrored, we're going to set the gun angle to 90. If we're not mirrored, we're going to set it to 270. And this is going to push it up in the correct direction. So if we're mirrored, it's going to go up 90 degrees. If we're not mirrored, it's going to go up 270. And this will make sure that it's always facing vertically. And then when we actually are walking left and right, it's actually going left and right. It's not being set in the upwards position. So we have a few more things we need to do. The first thing is, in our every tick, we need to make sure that we're always setting it to this state. Now, this is kind of the easy way of doing this, I guess, because now every single tick, we're making sure that we are checking to see if this is vertical. So now what this is going to do is it's always going to be vertical, which is exactly what happens in Bug Butcher when you're walking around, or when you're just shooting, when you're just standing there, it's always vertical. So when you let go of all input, it's actually going to flip back to the vertical position. When you actually hit right arrow, left arrow, that's when it actually goes to the normal thing that we're used to. All right, the only thing that we need here is the way to shoot the bullet. So what we can do here is, if our player state equals 0, so if our gun is vertical, then what we're going to do is have the keyboard check to see if the A key is down, just like in Bug Butcher, and we're going to add a condition every 0.09 seconds. We're going to have the gun spawn a bullet on layer, doesn't really matter, at the bullet image point of the gun. Then what we need to do is we need to set the angle of the bullet to 270 degrees so it goes upwards. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that is all we needed to do for this. Let's hit play and let's see now. So I'm walking, and I'm actually not even touching the key. You can see that our gun is facing upwards, which is what we want. Now when I walk to the right, nothing is being set. Oh wow. I forgot one thing. I knew it. What I needed to do is I need to actually have my keyboard trigger for right and left arrow. So let's go keyboard if the key is pressed, because we never actually set the state. If the right arrow is pressed or down, and if the left arrow is down, then we're just going to set the state. So right is going to be set the value of the state to 2, and left is going to be set it to 1, just like that. So let's make sure that we put these at the top underneath our every tick. The way Construct 2 reads events is from top to bottom, and we need to make sure that these are here to trigger this. Otherwise, it just won't work. So let's hit play. And now we can see when I hold down the right arrow key, our gun goes there. And when I hit A, it doesn't work. But when I let go, we can actually shoot. So there we go. We're actually using our state engine. And now we're actually moving around. Now, obviously, you'd have a walk cycle and stuff like that. And even one other thing I want to kind of mess around with is if I kind of push everything down. So if I select everything and I just kind of push it down to half of this layout, so it's just kind of showing more of this level, you can even see there how much bigger our 2D space looks, how we've actually created this to look a lot bigger. And you can actually also see right around here where I created that little collision box to be in the middle of the floor, that it's not acting correctly. So what you should do is have an invisible solid object, or even better is you can actually just split this up into two objects. So what I could do here is I can make this a bounding box again, and I can just kind of put this like this, and let me actually line this up to where I want its feet to be, and then I can not control click, I'm going to right click, clone this, and I'm going to make sure that this does not have the solid behavior. Something like that. You want to kind of mess around with this. You want to make sure that your collisions are pretty pixel perfect here. Otherwise, it's going to really mess up. And because this is the same color, you won't notice any difference unless I leave some space there. And if I overlap this, it actually creates a darker color, which might create a cool effect. And I actually still want to show you that one other thing I mentioned earlier. Yeah, you can see that I didn't do that perfectly, but mess around with this, and I really want to see what levels you can create with this in Construct 2. I think it'll really be a good exercise for you. I can see that because this has the opacity, because this is not perfect, it didn't work the way I intended it to, so now I gotta mess around with the Z order. But having that two objects and having this be a perfect bounding box is going to make sure that this collision works properly. So the one thing I want to show you is this, and this is the final thing here. We are done with this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching this. I wanted to show you this. If I have, let's say, a lighter object, and I take the rectangle tool and I put let me grab a darker color. If I took the rectangle tool and did this, yes, it creates a very sharp edge right there between the two colors. You can see that's really defined. There's no easy transition into the colors. But if I put the alpha of this down and then I do it, it's going to be a lot softer, and it's actually going to work a lot better as some kind of transition into a 3D effect. I keep forgetting to make this 16 by 16, but hopefully you can see by doing this, it creates this, it should create more of a floor. And even if I had that be the floor, like right there or something like that, something along those lines, maybe that will also create this effect that we're really in this big environment and whatnot. I can see our gun is not being poked through correctly on the Z order, but you can see how messing around with these stark colors and changes and getting this 2D, 3D look, and just messing around with the spacing of this, the size of this, and the opacity of this changes your level design from here on in. And that's one of the biggest takeaways I think I didn't cover in the Bug Butcher, so I'm glad I could cover it now in this tutorial video. I'm sorry this tutorial video was a little bit more sporadic, but I really do hope that you learned a lot from this and will continue to learn a lot from more Let's Play to Learns in the future. If you did like this video, then please leave a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments if you're making a 2.5D level from this video. And also, if you have any other recommendations for games, then please leave that in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I am Jeremy Alexander, and I'll see you in the next one.